Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Munoz. Each episode, I bring on really interesting game changers, magic makers, a little bit of everything in between. And this week's episode is no different. I am beyond excited to have Walt Geer, who is the Chief
Hey,
Experience Design Officer at VML Weiner Health. We're going to have a great conversation about his story. I don't think you want to miss it, so take a listen. Hey, Walt.
hello. What's going on, Laura?
Well, doing stuff. We're here, there, and everywhere.
Here, there, and
Um,
everywhere sounds good to me. Sounds busy.
no, I'm not busy at all. Whatever do you mean?
Oh my God, of course not.
But I'm so glad to finally have you on the show. So as you know, first question, always the same. Answers, always amazing. I can't wait to hear what yours is going to be. So, Walt, what was your first job?
My first job was actually at a company called Trans World Entertainment, otherwise known as TWEC, and then Saturday Night FYEs, and then Coconuts. So they essentially were at the time the largest music distributor in the world. So go figure where they are now. Non-existent.
That was
Yeah,
interesting. They
but
don't live here no more.
they do. Yeah, I was a web content kind of designer-ish thing. So like long story really short, I basically lied in my interview that I knew JavaScript and HTML and Photoshop. I got the job. I continued to learn on the job and went to the library, and that was that. I was there for like 6 months. I mean, I lasted at 6 months till I got another offer. Then I went to JP Morgan. So like it was all good. It
It
worked
was a
out.
stepping stone. It was a proper stepping
It
stone.
was indeed.
Interesting. Cool. All right. So you learned along the way that you can fake it till you make it. Great.
Mhm.
And then once you find a better deal, get the heck out. I get it. I like it.
Yes.
So obviously, you've come a long way from working for a company that no longer exists because that industry imploded
Yeah.
to where you are now. I'd love to hear what that career journey looked like.
It's really interesting. I think when you look at my journey, I kind of zigzagged and went around a bit, right? Like, so I did some like web design stuff, and then I got into ad tech, and then I was like a front end designer, and I did a little bit of back end stuff, and then I was a product manager, and so like I shifted around a bit. But I think my intent was always that, the more I know, the more I can do, the better positioned I am for the next job. So, I actually in college, was high school and college as an all-American pentathlete. So my mind state was like, I can be good at a lot of shit, and then that means I'm just better as a whole. So that was really my intent, really kind of just shuffling around and being where I could be, but really following the things that were interesting to me.
So wait, you were a pentathlete in college? Back up the truck here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Explain this, because I'm sure folks don't know it.
Yeah, so pentathlete, so it's five events. So
Mhm.
it's the hurdles, long jump, high jump, shot put, and the 1500 meter run. Yeah, which is basically 100 meters shy of a mile. So yeah, that was my thing. I was an all-around athlete. I was good at everything. Didn't really excel at one thing, but because I was good at a lot of things, it allowed me to do, pentathlon well.
Were you in a D1 school?
I was, yeah. So out of high school, okay, like literally I was like the kid that like I was getting tons of scholarships when I was in ninth grade. So I was like, man, why am I working hard in school? I'm gonna go wherever I want. So I literally stopped doing my work, and I went from A's and B's to like C's, and I'm like, well, I'm still passing and I'm still going to the next grade, and college is still hitting me up. That changed pretty quickly when I was a senior, and I was looking at a few different cool schools who basically were like, looking at me for a full rise. Were like, wait, hold up, pump the brakes, the grades. So they said I should go to a junior school for a year and then transfer out. I went to SUNY Delhi, which was like 6 nights a week. It was like the Black Mardi Gras. Okay. Like, okay, like it was like bananas. You gotta understand, I was upstate New York at the time in Niskayuna outside of Albany, which is like all white. Had like 10 black friends, that was it. And then I went to school that was like 70% black. I lost my mind. So I
Like,
stayed for I stayed,
hey.
I was there for a year. I was supposed to bounce, and then I basically decided let me stay for two instead. And then I got nervous when the colleges came back around about being owned. So I went to this small Division I school in New Jersey called Monmouth University. Because they were like, just come and we'll be happy you're here. And that's where I went. Yeah.
Wow.
My story.
So so the story, so it really is like how you were able to sort of adapt and be in different places. and use your gifts in different ways. And that's what I always see when folks are just chock full of amazing magic. So you've been at Pensacola, you've been bouncing from job to job. How did you end up in our side of the house here in advertising?
So I'd actually been well I've been really kind of doing advertising majority of my career, right? I mean, it was like while I was at, ad tech companies and publishers, like I was always focused on, developing creative innovative solutions. So earlier in my career when I was at the New York Times, I worked on a team. We invented what we called surround sessions. And so it was like, how do we actually continue a story with a brand after we see them for the first time? Well, why don't we actually use something called cookies and we'll follow them for 5 page views. Surround sessions are now called sequential messaging, which all of us are targeted with every single day,
You
right? You
mean
go to web.
Instagram following me every single day and knowing exactly that I like jewelry and cashmere?
Yep, like where you been, and you went and saw some shoes on that on this site, and went over here, and they follow you. Yeah, all that. Later on, I went and I patented a lot of things around like video ad products. One of which was skippable pre-roll, right? Which is 5 4 3 2 1, and you skip. Right? So like I had always been thinking about, how you innovate and how you create engaging opportunities for consumers by way of the technology and innovation and creative. And so like I literally had an opportunity to go work at TBWA. That for me was an opportunity to get into the agency side, but they said, hey, the role is just health, and I was like, I don't know if I could do this health shit. And we sat and met, and I felt super inspired by the team, and figured let me just give this a shot. And, for me, it was about at least getting an opportunity to get into the agency side because getting into the agency side at an executive level is really hard unless you've been at an agency for years. And I had zero agency experience. So I got in. As soon as I got in, maybe 6 months in, VML started reaching out, and I was like, I can't go anywhere this soon, guys. And we spoke and spoke and spoke for about a year, and then yeah, landed over here, right? Where 65% of my work is health, and then the other, smaller portion is non-health. So, it was kind of one of those things. I just randomly ran into the right people and right opportunity, and it worked out.
I think you're selling yourself a little short still. Just a teeny tiny. Um, but getting back to that, you've done some really amazing work in health, and you gave a great talk at our Reimagining series about around health equity, and I think that more of us need to talk more about this because it's so important. As we sat through a pandemic the last 2.5 years, some of the work you've been able to do has been quite impactful, and so why don't you share some of that?
Yeah, it's interesting because, and that is another reason why I think I really started to enjoy health, right? Especially through this pandemic, what we saw is, so many pharma companies that are actually trying to reach out to people of color and specifically Black people in a lot of ways. I mean, you think about like, fibroids, and then, certain cancers and like prostate cancer, or, all these areas are areas that I just, prior just really didn't think about or know much about. And so, when you've worked in advertising for so long, we have this notion that success is defined by, your title, your salary, your car, the watch in your wrist, the house, like all this shit, like the business you won and the awards and the cans. And yeah, that's all cool and gravy. It's all good. But like I think after years of doing this shit, you start to get to a point where you want to do work that is not only just inspiring, but work that actually makes an impact on people. And through the pandemic, what it showed us is this massive spotlight was put on, Black people, right? And it's something that you and myself have known for years, but like all of a sudden the rest of the world's like, oh my God, this is really a thing.
Who knew?
Who knew? My
Whoa!
God, it's crazy. But it was a positive thing because it allowed people to really understand in a more authentic manner, like what it is that we go through on a day-to-day basis. And I think that what people don't realize is on the health side, like we always, I'm sure people have heard the joke, and you're at work and they say, oh, we're not saving lives here. In health, you actually
You
are.
actually are.
Right, we actually are. And coming out of the pandemic, I'd like to say we're coming out of it at least. It was wildly, like inspiring to be working on a brand that now is like the most popular brand in the entire world, which is Pfizer. Like 3 years ago, no one would have ever thought that a pharma company would be the most well-known brand in the world, and they are. And I think that a lot of brands and individuals learned what it meant to be authentic, what it meant to actually meet people where they are, what it meant to be present and create an opportunity to truly, make an impact on a life. And I think that within the health space, it's the only place where you can actually do that. And what's been interesting too is that for so many years, everyone would always say, "Oh, health is like 10 years behind everyone." Well, I do believe that health isn't as fast paced as like as a Coca-Cola or some of these or Fords or these other brands or Wendy's. I do believe that this pandemic forced them to be a lot more digital than they have in the past. And now we're working on things with AR and VR and like all this cool stuff you would have never thought of 3 years ago. Now these brands are doing in a big way because they understand the importance of actually owning, their brand and what their brand means in this space as opposed to just like shipping drugs to HCPs.
Yeah, it's such a. I mean, it's similar. We've talked about this in some of the work that we did during COVID. Is that if you frame this around communities and talk to people with dignity, guess what happens?
Yeah, oh, yeah,
They will pay attention.
yeah,
Like this is not that hard.
yeah.
But meeting people where they are, honestly and authentically, is the key here. And it's so much that we saw, with, folks having, fear of getting vaccines because you had folks wearing military fatigues going into certain neighborhoods and being like, hey, come get a shot. Like it freaked everybody out. And, allowing that, leading with empathy and leading with the understanding that you have to talk to different groups differently, and authentically and not be team try too hard, was a
Mhm.
lesson I thought a lot of brands finally got a clue about over the past 2 years.
Oh yeah, and they most certainly did. I mean, it was yeah, I think it was a very interesting learning experience for a lot of people.
So, okay, now you're here at VML Line Our Health, and you also do this really awesome series on Instagram where you have these great conversations with leaders who are, big shots doing what they're doing the damn thing. And obviously that kind of blew up during 2020 when, it was a challenging summer for a lot of people.
Sure.
Uh, what was the response to that, and what prompted you to actually say that this is a time for me to like step out, and use my platform to have these conversations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that I did a post, I don't know, maybe like 4 years ago, and I did the post on ageism. And it was like literally one morning I woke up, it was like 6 a.m. and I happened to look, peruse through LinkedIn. And I saw all these people posting 30 under 30 and 30 under 30. And I just did a post. It was like, I forgot exactly. It said something to the effect of like, all these people are awarded for 30 under 30, 40 under 40, as if there's no talent over 40. And there's a ton of talent over 40 and whatever. Right. And I went back to sleep, and then I woke up like, I don't know, 10, 11, a couple hours later, 2, 3 hours later, and like people were calling me and saying, "Oh my God, this post you did is blowing up." Next thing you know, it's got like a million views, and then like, Forbes ended up writing an article about it, and it turned into a thing. And what I realized is that, and by the way, like 20 people, not even kidding you, a day were sending me DMs on LinkedIn, like, "Oh my God, I just, thank you for the post. It meant so much. I'm, 45 or I'm 50 or I'm 60, and this is what I'm going through." People were sharing all of these stories with me. So it showed how a single post that I wasn't even really thinking about touched people in a really impactful way. So for me, it made me that moment, I realized, holy shit, like if one post that I wasn't even thinking about moved so many people, um, why can't I do this for other areas that I really care about as well, specifically around, black and brown people or black creatives? So I just took it on myself to just basically, start kind of writing what I felt and being in the moment. A lot of people look at it and say, "My God, how do you do this and your job?" Like people don't realize I'm not a fucking social media influencer. Like I don't plan my posts and shit and like for tomorrow and the next day and the next day. I post maybe once a week, and I post when I'm in the moment feeling a certain way, and it might take 5 minutes of my time. But through the pandemic, what was interesting is I figured, well, if I have these very important conversations, I need to have them with people who also have influence, but a lot larger influences than myself, and people who can open up the amount of people like viewers and really, help set the tone and create a real conversation that can be impactful. So I essentially started calling people in, right? And it was people like Gary Vaynerchuk. It was people like Mark Pritchard. But then it was people like, Sugar Shane Mosley, right? Like one of the most decorated boxers in the world. And having conversations with him about the importance of showing up and what showing up means, right? Or the other day, last week, Mosan Marno, who was an actress on the Blacklist in House of Cards, and us having a very real conversation around, Iran and what's going on in Iran. These are just, conversations that for me it's about like transparency and educating individuals who have the time to listen.
What's been the thing that surprised you the most about the response?
I think that I mean a few things, right? Is One is the impact that it's been having. Simple conversations, right? Like the one conversation where I talked about accountability with Gary Vaynerchuk, and then this conversation led to him saying in our discussion on live in front of I think it was like 44,000 people, he said, "Oh, well, this by this time, whatever, next year, I'm gonna have 4 black C-suite." And I was like, "Okay, went from 1 to 4, sounds good to me." And like
Yeah.
being at Cannes, this past summer, and being on at an event, and this brother came up to me and said, "Hey man, I wanted to introduce myself to you. I want to thank you because I'm one of the 4 that were hired, and because of that conversation you had, I'm here today." Right? So that was dope. But like the other thing that really surprised me too was like the amount of hate that's in this space, right? Because while 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people are inspired, for every 5, 10 people that are inspired, there's that one person out there that is, sadly on the other side of the fence. And the amount of hate that I get in my DM is also crazy. I mean, I got like crazy Trumpers and people saying things like, "Oh, like, because of you, I can't get a job," and it's crazy, absurd stuff.
It's interesting because similarly, like, I've had some really interesting DMs, and
Right.
I'm like, keep that energy for yourself because your name's here and I will post it. But more importantly, it's that moment where you're like, I have a platform, I'm using it for good, and in your mind, you think me using my platform for good is somehow affecting you
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
And how did we even get here with that? That's where how many leaps do you have to make to get to that point where you think that somehow what I'm saying is going to impact you personally?
Oh yeah.
And the cognitive dissonance that happens, and like that, it's a microcosm of how we got here, where the world we are right now,
Yeah.
across social media. It's an interesting commentary because you're like, wait a second, like, I don't know you from Adam. How am I responsible because your life has not worked out the way you wanted it to? But yet you'll disassociate everything else in your universe and pick on the black guy who's making a smart comment.
Oh yeah, I had last year I had a white woman send an email to like 15 global C-suite in our agency here at VML. Subject line was Walter Geer doesn't like white. What Walter Geer is racist, doesn't hire white people. Like crazy, crazy shit, like crazy stuff.
And you have to look at it, and on the one hand you feel sorry for those folks. You're like, if that's how you are responding it, then there's not much we can do to help you. But also, why, like, stop trying to knock the bread out of my mouth. We have nothing to do with you.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's also this weird privilege that, like, if I do that, then I will somehow affect someone I don't even know. And it's weird. It's a very interesting place to play as a black leader, when you're in the C-suite, because you get really interesting thoughts about how you have to respond to some stuff. Because I'm sure you've been in places where you're like, wait, what did you just
Yeah,
say?
yeah. I mean, I mean, it's some of this. I mean, look, here's the thing. Like the same way social media has empowered me to go out and make an impact and touch people, right? Like other people feel inspired to, say the things that they want to do, right? So social has been a positive and a negative thing, most certainly. But I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, this is life. People get mad or upset about the craziest shit. Like you can't make everybody happy.
Listen. Listen, you're not ice cream. You're not gonna make everybody happy. That's you just have to deal with it on that side of the universe. But
Mhm.
thinking about making you happy and thinking about your accomplishments, what do you think you tell 21-year-old Walt?
Um, I'd probably tell a 21-year-old version of myself to show up. Show up and be you. It took me a long time, and I think it takes a lot of us a long time to be us, right? To be, the best version of us possible when we show up at the work, because it's easy. I'd say it's easier for some people, I guess, when you're, SVP or EVP or you're C-suite, right? When you're on the come up in 3, 4, 5 years in, there's this feeling of making sure that you're appeasing everyone in the room, you're not making anyone feel uncomfortable in the room, and that's a difficult feeling or difficult space to be in. So I'd say that I need to show up earlier, right? Because I think if I showed up as me earlier than I did, um, I would have had a I would have gotten to where I am a lot faster, I think.
Well, never look at it as you've forgotten somewhere faster, but always like the road you're on is the road you're on.
Oh, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely.
but I think that's really key what you said about the power of showing up because I think about this often with my own career of like people who know me now versus when I was much younger think I'm 100% a different person. I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
I had to grow up. Like the shy kid who was a web project manager is not the executive you see now. It has to happen. And I think oftentimes when we're black in our industry, it's a different universe that you have to play in because you have to try and be 18 different people all at the same time.
Oh yeah, it's tiring as shit.
It's very tiring.
Tiring. Yeah. Yeah, it
um,
takes a while to really settle in and get used to that. But I'll tell you, like the literally the day and week and month that I started being me, I started doing the best work of my career. It's probably that one year was probably one of the best years of my entire career, like
yeah,
hands down.
I think that's probably one of the kind of interesting gifts of the pandemic because it gave people a chance to kind of sit down
Yeah.
and think about who do you want to be, what do you want to do, what do you want to stand for, and if that's what you want to do, take this challenging time as an opportunity to really go for what you want. And write that post and say
Absolutely.
and say it out loud. Do
Yep.
that thing. It's so important and so impactful. Um, so talk to me about a time you had a challenge in your career and you're like, okay, this is nuts. I'm never gonna find my way through. And then you did.
Lots of times. Lots of times. I mean, here's the thing, like I like a challenge, right? And for example, like I'm also last minute to doing shit and work in general because like it challenges me to get it done uh quickly, good, etc. You know, here's a great example. When I was at Viacom, I had a really cush job and I was chilling. I was doing great, loved it. I was happy, had a big budget that I could spend every quarter, every month. And my boss and his boss, both good friends of mine, left to go to MySpace, which was crumbling. Like when I'm telling you crumbling, Facebook was on the come up, and like MySpace was like nosediving. It was like plummeting into the ground, right? And I'll never forget getting the calls like, "Hey, do you want to come over?" And I was like, "Yeah, I really like you, but I don't know if MySpace is like I don't know. Like I'm cush here." And he said, "Hey, come over and then, give me like 2 months and I'll make you a vice president." And so I thought and thought and thought, and I went over. Now, when I went over, I had a couple challenges. Number one is my job was to how do you help increase revenue substantially so we can actually make a sale here? At the time, they were getting like $300,000 a day for a homepage takeover. We all remember homepage takeovers. Those days were fantastic. And so how do I do that? So I was immediately put in this position where, God, like, okay, now I'm actually responsible for revenue, to some degree, and my role is to be inventive. So I felt a massive amount of pressure to perform at a very rapid pace. So
Hmm.
we partnered with MIT and these folks, and we built out one of the first usability labs, it's a biometric usability lab. So essentially allowed us the ability to understand things like color, call to action, speed of animation, position on page, all these things by pulling things like heart rate, pupil dilation, arousal, which is the sweat in your palms. whether someone's leaning back or forward, facial expressions. So I could essentially create the perfect ad or perfect solution. So it's like we started with building that, and that was like $1 million buy. So like, you're praying like shit, man. We're spending a lot of money. I hope there's a return on investment here. And then building out a whole team, and that was my first time where like running a team that spanned across the U.S. So it was a really scary and challenging moment for me because performing uh, poorly meant I would probably lose my job, right? So that was probably one of the biggest challenges, but one we overcame, right? I took homepage takeovers, and that usability lab allowed us to create solutions that went up to like $1 million a day. Um, and we ended up selling it to Justin Timberlake and a company called Specific Media. So it was a wild time, but it was also fun. I think challenges can be fun, right? And I think that we all need to be challenged to some degree, because if you at a job or at a place where you're just sitting on your hands, you're gonna grow stagnant. And especially as a creative, right? You have to have different challenges that force you to kind of go outside of your comfort zone to create things that are really inspiring and magical.
Well, that's the kind of thing about it all is that like once you get through those challenges, it's like, whoa, so much else came through this. I
Oh
learned
yeah.
so much. And now I have all these other amazing skills that will help me get to the next insane challenge that I have. And that's a fantastic example of that. So, obviously you got a lot to do. Um, and you've got to try and make some time for Walt. So what do you do for your self-care?
That's a really hard question. I'm poor at it. And I think I
There is
really
no
am.
grade. There is no grade.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's like, the more senior you get, the less time you have, right? And it's like the little time I have, I try to be present with my family, and I'll be honest in saying like that's not even enough, because the time that I do get to spend with them, like then I'm tired or stuff like that. So, you know, for me, I don't really have that time like I used to, right? Which is unfortunate. But for me, I just enjoy sitting around the house and being with my wife and daughter. It's fun. It's like I'm one of these people that also have to constantly be on the move. So the time that I get with them, I'm like, all right, where do we want to go? Let's go to a restaurant. Let's go to the mall, go buy something. Let's go over here. Or I'm trying to fix something. So like this weekend, I was like, I put together a whole ass fence, around one of the sides of my house. So I
Sounds
try to
very
keep.
Long Island to
Oh
me.
yes, it is.
It's like,
We're country out here. So it's my time. I don't do a good enough job, and it's funny because like I'm always telling and preaching that to other people. Like you gotta have your you time. But it's a challenge. My time is my downside be outside of work here. Like then I get then I'm mentoring 4 or 5 people every single week, and then I'm doing like a live here, like like I did last week around Iran or some random shit. So it's hard, but I understand that we don't have a lot of time on this planet, right? We're a dot on this line that is like potentially infinite. So my whole thing is like when I'm long gone and dead, I hope that people can turn around and say, this is someone who helped me, right? And I think that the people around me that I can actually make an impact on will eventually make an impact on my daughter, right? So this is like the long-term play to helping her really.
oh yes, this is all a grand plan to make sure that your daughter has everything she ever want in an entire life forever.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Amazing.
I'm trying.
I mean, I can't foresee that being an issue. And she's going to be amazing because she is
Oh, you're so
adorable
kind. Oh,
and
you're so kind.
and brilliant. But the thing is, you do have to make time for Walt, and
Yes, so true.
and so whether it's stopping to buy some new Jordan ones,
Well, that's a
um,
problem.
like same here. I have a similar issue. Flight Club and I are very good friends,
Ah,
um, and StockX, but that's neither here nor there. But I think especially as the more senior you get, it seems like your time windows dwindle. But for the years when I had my own agency, I was always about a relentless hustle, can't stop, won't stop. And now I'm all about relentless rest.
yeah,
And I
man.
think it is imperative, especially for us folks of color, because we have to be 18 people. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's really important that we find those moments of us time, even if it's an hour a week. So if it's a walk, if it's listening to a podcast, if it's going for a massage, if it's retail therapy, for Christ's sake, whatever, we at least build that time in for us because the world is heavy. It is the world that we live in, and it is going to be heavy. And if we don't take that time for ourselves, our bodies will be like, you know what? I'm gonna make you sit down.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
got to do it, Hunter.
It's so important. It definitely is.
And so now, last question for you.
Okay.
Do
Shoot.
you have a give and or an ask of the audience? So this can be kind of anything. So it could be, here's a great book I read, here's some good advice, or I would like you all to do X, Y, and Z. So you can do either or both.
Yeah, so I'll two things, right? Number one is I'll say that, about maybe a year ago, I did a simple post on LinkedIn. The post was like, hey, and a lot of people want to know how they can actually help other individuals. Here's an opportunity. In this thread, I need you to post one of two things. One, if you're a person of color and need mentoring, please post in here and say what it is you need help with. And two, if you're a leader, right, or executive who can have 15 to 20 minutes of time to help mentor someone, find someone in these comments and then connect with them. That post ended up making like 40 or 50 connections. And I literally, someone the other day just posted and tagged me like, oh, I just want to thank you for this post you did a year ago. I became friends with this person. They helped me get a new job. They helped me look at it was kind of cool, right? So I say that because like my ask would be, for people to take a moment to help someone else, right? Because it's not like it doesn't 10, 15 minutes does not cost you anything. 20 minutes, 30 minutes doesn't cost you anything. So I say, send the elevator back down, right? Create opportunity. That simple conversation can change someone's life. It really can. And the other thing I'd ask is that, I have a rule that I abide by. And this helps kind of diversify judges, panels, conferences, etc. And it's my 13% rule. 13% of people in the U.S. are African American, right? Black. So anytime I'm asked to speak at an event, to be a judge for an event, award show, etc., I say, okay, great, be happy to, but I need to ensure that 13% of other individuals attending this or not attending but working this are also Black. And if you have any concerns with getting those people, I have a list of about 20 people right here that I can send you an Excel doc with their LinkedIn, phone number, email, etc. This is just another simple, easy way to actually help create more diversity in some of these spaces and create opportunity for other individuals. I like to actually send over like mid-level creatives when I do that because that gives them the opportunity to get a spotlight that they don't typically have. So I challenge anyone else, out there, and trust me, I've only had one event tell me they couldn't do it. They told me on a Sunday night that they only got like 10%, and I was keynoting that Monday morning, and I told them I couldn't keynote and pulled out. So, that's what I'd say is those two things that can be wildly helpful.
Awesome. And I think here's what we're gonna do. When this podcast goes up, I will put in the chat that we can start that thread on that chat.
Absolutely.
So that we can both use our respective audiences to fire that through because I think it's so important to lift as we climb because you cannot do it any other way. Like we don't get here alone and we won't get to the next place alone. And
Absolutely.
I'm a firm believer, and I think I'm sure you are too, that like however challenging it was for us coming up, I want that to be a whole lot easier for our next generation.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And the way that we do that is like, come say hi. Like we are not, we're not living in golden towers. We
Yep.
might be busy. I mean, I'm sure your schedule is insane as is mine. But there are more of us now than there have ever been across our industry, with more of us having seasoned our titles than anywhere else than I've ever seen in my 15-year career. And so I want us to be able to share that great knowledge of the folks who are coming up. And again, like we don't have to repeat the cycles of the past. Let's lift everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And also you're right. Like this, I mean, I say this all the time. It's like just be kind to people. It
Yeah.
doesn't you have to be everyone's best friend. It never means that.
Yeah.
It just is the basic kindness to folks because you never know your good word on a Tuesday at 1:57 to someone on a call where you ask, how are you? Could impact them in ways you don't even begin to know comprehend, and I think that's so very important. So it's fantastic advice, and thank you so much for sharing that, Walt.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you. I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Oh, it took a year. But as I said, Walt Greer, you're one of my favorite people. And
Nice.
so good to have you on the show. We'll put all the details in the show notes for folks to connect with you on all the social medias. We're going to do our little exchange on mentorship within our chat so folks can sign up if you're looking to be mentored. And if you can spend time to mentor, again, get a Calendly link and build it and then just drop that in and say, I've got 15, 20 minutes. I'm happy to chat with you, especially as we come into the holiday season where folks can have a little bit more time. We encourage folks to do that. But just keep striving and doing all the really great work that you do, Walt. Your voice is necessary and needed in our industry. So thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Cool. And that is our show.